就在中国最后的事情就是中国在中国朋友们不很喜欢在中国之内旅行旅游。中国之内有很多的城市很有意思，很有历史。还有什么？我觉得住在中国很方便，有微信你可以，如果你是一个女孩，这个美发美课就是很方便，你可以每个星期做一个按摩，做一个 face massage. I don't know how to say face massage. 对，很多的事情。So just said. I really like it. It's very nice. China has a lot of places you can travel, which are very interesting, have a long history. It's very convenient. You have WeChat and all these apps. If you're a girl, you can do really a lot of beauty things. So I go to a massage usually once a week and so on.
Like I talked to some foreigners living in China or in Hong Kong. They have for example, partners from the US and they only come, some of them, they even refuse to come to Hong Kong, but some of them, okay, we only come to Hong Kong. We never cross the border with China. It's dangerous, they say. It's dangerous. They'll be arrested or it's like a lot of fears actually out there for people who never been to China who don't understand this part of the world, I'll say.
There's this very unrealistic fear that you come to China and you just get arrested and they will not let you out. And of course that doesn't happen. I mean, are foreigners arrested in China? Yes. Is foreigners' passports sometimes taken away in China? Also, yes, and then they can't leave. But there's always a legal proceeding. Usually it's related to embezzlement in their company or whatever. So it's not a Wild West country. So there is a legal reason, and then they're also not mistreated. So they're not locked away somewhere, at least to my knowledge. But this is not the picture that many people in the West have. But we also have to see where do they get the information from. And what is the target of those information sources, right? And all the newspapers and so on, they either want to sell their magazine or they want clicks. And so they have really the most dramatic and most negative, fear-inducing headlines they can possibly find, because this is what drives engagement. And so their information, and even in Germany, so the information that the average person have about China is tainted quite negatively, but simply because people are bored by objective news sometimes or often, and they don't always want to know good news. So they are much more likely to engage with and to have a strong emotional reaction to negative news. And so newspapers and news agencies, they just capitalize on it.
I talked to a lot of foreigners in different countries. So once someone moved from, let's say, Hong Kong to Singapore, they start saying oh, Singapore is the best, I made the right choice, I made the right decision. Then they move from Singapore to Bangkok, and then they say exactly, yeah, Bangkok is much better, the quality of life. So it's basically people need this to justify their own choices in life.
I really agree. And not only that, I would even go one step further, and I would say for people who haven't been in China, for example, or at least in Asia, but who are from a Western country and are still in that Western country where they are, there is this consensus that Western democracy is the only model that is valid. And don't get me wrong, I'm very, very grateful to be born in a democracy and also in the years that I was born in, this our history. But I often feel that every country or region that doesn't have a Western-style democracy, it's not allowed, or they don't want to hear that other models can work. And of course, they work differently. And of course, all models have advantages and disadvantages and all of that. But they feel it's no, our model is the only superior one, and everything else is not allowed to be good. And so they really focus on the negative.
Yeah, even for me, I'm more I'll say Western-centric or Europe-centric, being raised in Russia. And Russia, I think Russia is tend to be more European country, especially I lived in Moscow. And then I was definitely more Europe-centric. But then after moving to Asia and spending many years here, I changed, and I completely agree with you. It's now I see, okay, this works, this also works, this model also works, and people just think differently, they manage their life differently. So it's really limited way of perceiving things that, okay, only democracy works. But what are the other biggest misconceptions people have about China? Based on your experience, maybe your friends back in Europe, they say, oh, it's like this or like that.
I think a lot of things. So China, in my opinion, is quite futuristic, and I know not everywhere. So I know Shanghai, Beijing, Shenzhen, and so on is completely a different universe than second, third, fourth, fifth tier cities on the inlands. But I think China is very open to change, and China is very adaptive. China has also developed so fast in the last 2 decades. So it's just this constant change has been normalized. So they are quite open to change, and everything is always evolving. And I think that's very hard to fathom for anybody in Europe, at least. So at least in Europe, we know something, and then we assume that this information stays the same for the foreseeable future. But what you know about China today may be quite outdated tomorrow, or surely really outdated the day after. I also think there's still the misconception that everybody in China works in like slave labor conditions, or they are really suppressed by the government, and they must be. And again, because they must be, because it's not a democracy, so they have to be unhappy, and it can't possibly be, you know, they're living a normal life, and just like you and me and everybody else, you know, people find partners, get married, have hobbies, have their career. So actually people globally are quite similar. So I think that sometimes it's quite the difference. And at the same time, there's also a misconception that China is how it's portrayed in the movies. So Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, you know, because it's also not true. So I feel I would really recommend everybody to go and have a look. Everybody who goes, they just walk through the big cities and they're like, wow, what is going on? It's so modern. I think also people cannot fathom the size. Shanghai has now, after the pandemic, dropped a little bit in size. I think at the peak we had 27, 28 million people. Now we're down to 25 million. But 25 million in a city like Shanghai, I mean, Germany has what? 82 million people, you know? So it's hard to grasp the sheer size.
Do they say anything about safety? Like, oh, Miriam, are you safe there?
China is, on a personal safety level, the safest I've been in. So I travel a lot for business, but also for my summer vacation, for example. So especially as a woman traveling alone, you don't have to be afraid. So I'm more aware and conscious of taking a subway at night or walking down a dark street, or whether I take a taxi or I walk in the evening than I am in China. So it is very unlikely that something happens to you, a violent crime happens to you in China. Of course, it happens. Accidents, of course, make sure you look left and right when you cross the street and so on. But just on a personal safety level, I feel very, very safe.